Hi everyone, I'm Siobhan Milner and this is Total Performance, a podcast dedicated to all things athletic performance and injury prevention. Join me and my guests as we explore the many aspects that come together to build our total performance picture. Let's get into it. Hey everyone, a big welcome back to season 2 of the Total Performance podcast. And for our first episode of season 2, I'm speaking with Kendall Green. Kendall Green is head strength and conditioning coach and owner of Green Roots Performance and Wellness in Williamsburg, Virginia. He has previously served as a high school head track and field coach, football coach, and strength and conditioning coach. He specializes in speed and power development, which is why today I'm speaking to him about speed development. Kendall's key advice throughout the podcast is to keep it simple. So I hope that even if speed development is new to you or you feel like it's a little bit murky, I hope you're going to get some really practical advice from listening to Kendall talk on this topic. We talk about the different focus for speed training across age ranges and practically how that training can and should change. And we also talked about how speed can be developed in the weight room. This will be a really interesting podcast for anyone interested in getting faster, anyone who's really interested in actually improving their speed, their acceleration, their deceleration, but also I think really interesting for anyone who's working with youth athletes and is interested in athletic development as a whole, because we spent a lot of time talking about training young athletes, so even younger than high school age, but also high school age athletes all the way up to college level. I hope you enjoy. Welcome, Kendall.
Thank you for having me, Siobhan. Thank you. It's awesome.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here. We're going to talk about speed today, speed training and speed development. So I wanted to start off by asking you, what is speed training and why is it important for athletes?
Sure. So for me, speed training is kind of twofold, where you have the common understanding of speed training. We're working on sprint ability, speed development as far as field work. And that kind of encompasses obviously sprinting, deceleration, acceleration, change of direction, agility. Everything to me is as far as field work goes and the more sport specific movement, that's what I would consider speed development. But the other side of that would also be just the rate of muscle contraction. So I know, especially on, and I'm sure we'll get into this at some point, there's the common idea that you can't develop speed in the weight room, or you can't develop speed effectively in the weight room. But I think if we look at it from a more anatomical or physiological standpoint, then we actually can develop speed. You might not be able to develop those other things that we were talking about before, being sprintability or whatever field movements we're looking for to be fast. But I think we can we do it all the time. We can develop the muscles to fire faster. So for me, that's what speed development is those two things working hand in hand.
I feel like I'm already going to go on tangents, but talking about
please.
the whole podcast is a tangent, really. So
fine with me.
I'm kind of interested with the rate of force development when it comes to speed or training for rate of force development in the weight room. Do you think
Right.
that athletes and coaches need to have access to things to measure velocity? Like, do they need that sort of equipment, or can they work on it at a more basic level, do you think?
Yeah, I'm a proponent of simplicity. I'm a wholehearted believer that, the KISS principle, keep it simple, stupid. You'll get more bang for your buck more times than not. I know when people have, the facility I work in that I own, I don't have access to a bunch of technology or certain pieces of equipment. One, because it's a smaller space, and two, because those things are expensive. But I think when you start getting, and we've seen it over the past couple of years, especially in college football, where people have access to these unnecessarily large budgets and they start getting into more sports science, which is great if you have access to those things. But then with that comes a lot more information as far as the data points that are being accessed. And I think when you start to get too much into the technology, or relying too heavily on the technology, I should say, that's when you start to lose a little bit of what you're actually trying to accomplish. I think speed, well, for both sides of what I explained, the field stuff as well as the weight room activities, speed is pretty simple. Obviously the development of it and the application of it, that can be a little more complex, but speed in and of itself is fairly simple. So I think keeping it simple for me at least would do most people better than having to invest in some external device. And they are great pieces. The VBT trackers, even video analysis, all those type of things. Those are great to have. I don't think they're necessary by any stretch of the imagination. We have people every year in world championship events, when the Olympics comes up, all these major sporting events where the best of the best are competing, and then you see some of them and from where they come from. I was actually listening to the episode you did with Elizabeth Oler earlier, and she was talking about Olympic weightlifting, and we see people from parts of the world that they got electricity and that's about it. So they're still getting the very best results with the most minimum of equipment. So I don't think at all the technology is necessary. Again, helpful 100% if you know what to do with it, if you know what you're looking at, if you know the all the data points you're getting, if you understand those things and how they can be incorporated into the training program and how the program can be progressed from there. But not necessary. Keep it simple, figure it out from there. Move whatever weight faster, be more efficient with your body movement. Stopwatches still work. I have a dasher system, but I still use my stopwatch from time to time. The dasher is great. It gives me what I need as far as tracking sprint times and agility times. But my stopwatch still works, and I got it for $4 from Walmart. I actually got two of them.
Oh, perfect. What a deal.
Big spender over here.
Okay, I feel like I want to dive into some of the weight room stuff, but I've got to pull back a little bit. So otherwise I'm just going to go down the weight room rabbit hole. People listening don't want to just hear about that. You've talked a little bit about what speed is, but what are some of the maybe common misconceptions about speed and speed training, and how can athletes and coaches avoid those or understand them better?
Sure. So I think the main and almost only misconception about speed development, speed training is volume. And I think, and when I say volume, I'm talking volume of work, obviously, and then also the volume of rest. And I think with true speed development, the importance of rest is almost just as important as the number of repetitions you're doing. So for me, with speed development, I work with athletes from middle school to college, but most athletes I work with are in the high school range, kind of right in the middle, where the vast majority of them want to improve their athletic ability, and they know they want to improve their athletic ability. So for me, we don't do a ton of volume as far as repetitions. Most of the volume takes place in the summer. The most volume I've had an athlete do is maybe 8 reps. That's for the higher end college athletes I know they can handle that amount of work. And then as far as the distance goes with that volume, one, because of the space I have inside, I only have really 5 yards of true sprinting space, which I do use a lot. But outdoors, I really have at best 25 yards of sprint space, so we can start getting into the max velocity stuff. But regardless, the volume that I've seen, again, with football primarily, football is probably as far as strength and conditioning goes, football probably has the furthest to go, in my opinion, just because it's been a thing for so long with football. They kind of, introduced strength and conditioning to the general population through football, but because some of the applications and protocols that football strength and conditioning coaches use, it's pretty archaic, in my opinion. So I already went off on a tangent. Anyways.
We love the tangents.
But yeah, the volume of work with the actual work and with the rest, I think that we often see speed work, and I wrote this in one of my articles. I attached the link to my article, but the volume of work and the limited amount of rest that's allowed with that volume it turns from speed development into conditioning, and it turns in conditioning for a sport that you're more than likely not training for. So I had a professor in college. He's actually my advisor. He was a long distance runner, and he was in his like late 60s, and he was still running marathons, which is awesome. But he would always tell the football players in class that his sport is our punishment, right? And as horrible as that sounds, it is the truth. And then often our punishment is also our conditioning. I played football in college, obviously, but the amount of running athletes are doing at a moderate at best tempo or intensity is not speed development. If they're breathing harder than they were when they, did the warm up, then they're probably not really doing speed development for the purposes that I train. I've only had two high level track athletes that I've worked with since I started this outside of the school I used to work at. So in my facility, if we're working on true speed development, we use what I guess in conditioning terms, the talk test, right? So if we're able to have a regular conversation in between reps, then I know we're in a good place, right? Obviously, if the distance is a little bit longer, you might be a little more winded, but it shouldn't be to the point where you have to take gulps of air in between a sentence, right? I don't trick them, but to make sure we're utilizing the rest in between sets to the best of our ability, I actually kind of create conversation. One, it helps build a relationship with the athlete, right? But also it ensures that they're taking advantage of the full rest. They're not getting super fatigued aerobically or even mentally. And so we can ensure the reps are going to stay of the best quality. So I think with young, especially again, football, high school, strength and conditioning, sports training, whatever it may be, a lot of people either in the private sector, they promote speed and agility training, or in the actual school setting, they are saying we're gonna get faster, whatever it may be. It turns into that conditioning piece where we're gonna do a bunch of reps because and I'm assuming in their mind, and I coach the sport, so I get it and play the sport. In their mind, they're thinking about the game itself and how they want their athletes to play fast, right? But they also want them to play fast within the condition of how the sport goes over time, where you're getting tired throughout the game, but we still want you to play fast. So they're trying to, I guess, match it up where we're tired in training, we're still running fast. That will translate to the game. You're tired in the game, you're running fast. And it's not, sometimes it works, usually it doesn't, just physiologically and from a pure definition standpoint, if we're working on speed, that's really all you can work on at any given time. Because as soon as fatigue sets in, that's when it turns into something else. And obviously, fatigue sets in naturally, but to what degree is it setting in? And as soon as you cross over that threshold, and the threshold is fairly, it's a very thin line between speed development and conditioning, right? But there's a lot of space on both sides of that line that you have to work with. So when coaches, when trainers, whoever it may be, says they're working speed development, they have to ensure that the rest is looked at just as equally as the work they're doing is.
As you say, the rest is super, super important to get that right intensity so that they're actually training speed.
Right.
But the other thing I wonder is maybe just from even a motivation standpoint, how do you get your athletes to really give you speed when you're doing those drills?
Sure. So the two things to that. When I first started, I've been training for, what year is this? 7 years, I think. I mean, I've been training and coaching for 7 years, and I didn't really start getting into true speed development how I see it now, probably maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I guess, 4 years ago, right before COVID. And so for me, when I start working with athletes, especially in that high school, college age range, the middle school group, I'm not super concerned with their actual speed development numbers per se. It's just a matter of them just getting comfortable running regularly. But for that age range, the high school to college group, when we first start, if I have a new athlete come in, they're not used to taking that rest, right? Because again, they've been training or working out with, either their school for X amount of years or with a different trainer that may not view it the same way I do. And so when we take longer rests, it's kind of a shock to them and they get, kind of antsy. But then once we progress and, either the reps increase, the distance increases, or then when they start to see their time decrease, that's when they really start to understand. It really starts cooking. They really appreciate the rest because they see what it has done for them. But as far as the motivation to improve, that's where the dasher comes in. I've only had the dasher for 3 years, I think. But we have the dasher. We can get a fairly accurate reading on their actual speed. They can see it, right, and then that internal competitive nature that they have, it comes out, and they kind of essentially motivate themselves. I don't have to do a whole lot. I try to be. I, I don't know if you can tell. My voice is fairly monotone, so I don't have a whole lot of excitement behind it. Not that I'm not excited. That's just how I talk. I try to, again, creating that relationship where, I like, I'll probably see the time. Well, I will see the time before they do because they're still, finishing the run or whatever. And when I'm charting it, they always turn around and say, "What was it about time?" I make a little face at them like, "Oh, getting a little spicy," and that kind of motivates them to, they get that little quick hit of dopamine where they like, "Oh, yeah, we can really let loose now." So yeah, that's pretty much it. But before I had the dasher, I was using the stopwatch in a couple of different ways. Well, I was using the stopwatch in one way, but I was doing kind of in my mind, I call it the poor man's speed technology. So with the stopwatch, I was doing a timed run for whatever distance, and it wasn't any further than, or any longer rather than maybe 3 seconds. So we would have our start land wherever, and then I would have cones marked off for probably up to 40 yards, even though I knew they weren't going to get there. If they can run 40 yards in 3 seconds, then you should probably be doing something else. But I would say obviously be, a little more reactive than them going on their own with the dasher. But, I would say go. I would try to be as accurate as possible with the stopwatch, where I would start the stopwatch as soon as they move, like same way with the dasher. But the effort would be to get as far as they can in X amount of time, right? So obviously with that, especially with kids, they're literally trying to get as far as they can get in whatever amount of time it is, right? So they'll push a little bit harder because they already know in their mind. It's a little bit different with the stopwatch than it is for the dasher. With the dasher, they can focus a little bit more on their technique. With the stopwatch, they're focusing a little bit, from my experience, they focus a little bit more on the effort. So trying to push themselves as far out as they can get in whatever time limit that is. We get the time, put a mark down or whatever, and we can see that over time either improve, or as they start to drop off, then we call it or whatever. And so the other way I was using that motivating aspect of their mentality, I guess, was I would have them run. It would be a set distance, so 10 15 yards, have them run a set or sprint a set distance. And I always tell them, we always think about the car when we're sprinting. So you're accelerating, pushing down on the gas, you're decelerating, pushing the brake. There is a space in between where you're not doing either, right? So you're coasting essentially, right? So accelerate fast as you can through 15 yards, take your foot off the gas, don't touch the brake at all, right? So in physics, we have, our laws of motion. An object in motion stays in motion unless acted on by an outside force, right? So if we can increase the distance of your coast, then we know in theory that you're getting faster, right? So if you're sprinting 15 yards and you coast, and obviously it's a little more subjective with them coasting because you can't really tell if they're slowing themselves down or if it's actually, gravity and their mechanics dropping off that's slowing them down. But putting that thought in their mind, like sprint through and then stop accelerating, but don't stop yourself. That protocol we usually did on the hill because it's a little bit easier to feel on the hill. Because the hill I have right outside of my facility, it's in the parking lot, but I have 15 yards up there, and then at the top of 15 yards it goes flat, right? So it's a little easier to feel going from the hill to flat, the deceleration. So that's where we usually did that, but it still worked on the field on flat ground. So we know if you're running a certain speed, right, and you get a certain distance, the goal is do the same thing, do the sprint faster, as fast as you can, obviously each rep, and then see if you get carried further by the momentum you created. So that's my before I got the technology of the dasher, that was my poor man's way of incorporating speed development with using time as the constraint or the motivator, so to speak. And it worked pretty well. Until I got the dasher, now everybody wants to use the laser, so the stopwatch is starting to get a little dusty, but still the same physics apply.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting also hearing like they're motivated when they hear the time that they've got through the dasher. Yeah. I recently started working with a team that they've got a bit of history of doing like repeated sprint ability tests. So they do have the very short rest. It's not a very high volume, but they have the very short rest. And what I see often, because one of the things they're measuring is how their speed drops off as well. So they're looking at the total time and how the speed drops off. But I see with some athletes, like they know, oh, if I can get around this for every sprint, then I'm going to get a better time. So they kind of pace themselves, which isn't necessarily what we're wanting. But I wonder, when you're really strong on saying like we are having this rest time and we're really going to rest, do you think that also helps prevent that pacing because they just know like I'm going to have that full recovery?
I think so. It's simply. I think having that rest and in their their programs are all individualized in a notebook. But for the speed work, for most of them, I put it on the board so they can see it, and it shows how much rest they're going to get. Even in their notebook with the lifting stuff, it shows how much rest they're allotted for whatever activity they're doing. So I do think that having the knowledge of the rest being there is definitely beneficial from an effort standpoint. I remember growing up, even when I was coaching, throw playing and coaching, I remember it would always be that one kid at the end of practice when we were doing whatever conditioning run. It'd always be that one kid like, how many are we doing? And everybody get mad. They know if somebody asked that, the coach was going to get upset and then make you run another one or whatever. It all made no sense. But so I think that the transparency of knowing, and I try to be as because I know what it was like when I was growing up. I try to be as transparent with the workout as possible. So I lay out every piece of information they could possibly need. Obviously, I'm still there so they could ask questions, but provide as much information as possible on what it is we're doing, so you kind of can prep yourself mentally, right? Knowing that, especially having things like the dasher and plyomat and all that type of stuff, having those things laid out where you have to hit a certain mark, and we've been tracking it over time to see improvement. Nobody wants to get worse, I don't think, especially in the private sector, because you're paying for this, right? So I'm going to do the best I can on my part, so the same is expected of them. And so they know they're there because they need to get better or they want to get better. So the effort is there. You just have to find, how to dig it out. And usually the transparency has helped a lot for me in that regard.
One of the things you touched on a little bit was about with some of the younger athletes, you might focus more on technique rather than actual speed training. So how do you feel that age and experience affects how athletes and coaches should approach speed training?
I've trained, the youngest athlete I've trained was 9. And I let him, because his brother was older. So I just had both of them in the middle school group. But for younger athletes, the KISS principle, I guess you add another S to it. So super simple. And the volume is, I would say you could push the volume a little bit higher, not much, by any means, but I think you can push the volume a little bit higher, but not necessarily to create some sort of adaptation physiologically, but more so to get the reps in, right? Create some form of consistency and build up the reps over time where they get more comfortable again moving in a particular manner. I know a lot of people don't have younger kids do sprint mechanic stuff. We do a very little bit of it. And we keep like A runs is probably the extent of it, just because I know they've done things similar to that in their sports, whether it be, high knees or butt kicks or whatever it is. And we kind of explain to them how they correspond with each other and what we're actually looking for. So it's something they already know. It's just putting it into more of a formal context. And so with younger athletes, I think there is obviously a limit of too much where they are either getting mentally fatigued or physically fatigued, and then obviously one affects the other. And then the result of those fatigues, they show up differently than they do for older athletes. And younger kids are a little more internal with their frustrations, I think. Obviously, some of them can be more vocal, I guess. But younger athletes are a little more internal, and they kind of shut down to some degree, more so than a high school athlete would, from my experience. And there, it's much harder to get them back in that, middle school, elementary school, if you're in that field. Harder to get them back once they do cross that line. Like, I've had high school kids like, yeah, I'm ready to go home. It doesn't bother me when they say that. I don't really care. They'll be all right. But when, once the younger kids say like, I want to go home, then that's when it becomes like a real issue as far as the responsibility that we have as coaches, because most of them are not as mentally durable or as mentally resilient as older athletes, just because they don't have the experience. So I think the getting the experience of just enough, right? Getting into where they're understanding it, and usually for them, for younger athletes, I let them get it wrong a little bit more than I would for older athletes. When I see older athletes start to get it wrong, or their times start to go up, or whatever it may be, the form starts to fall apart, I'll cut them off almost immediately, because then I know now you could start creeping into the mental fatigue, the upset, whatever, but it's also starting to get closer to the injury, right? Getting closer to possible potential injury. With younger kids, I know, I told, like, when the freshmen came in, when I used to coach football, they would talk about how they, like, one day they like pulled their hamstring, allegedly. Next day they'd be at practice running around, or before practice, I was like, you don't have enough muscle to pull yet. So I know they're a little more physically resilient just because they don't have a lot, but they're mentally, like, they don't have that same resilience that an older athlete was, because they don't have the experience. They've never been put, most athletes haven't been put in situations where mental resilience is necessary, right? To the degree that they will soon experience, right? As far as athleticism goes, or sport goes. So just keeping the simplicity of it the main thing as the age goes down. You can still do some of the same things. It doesn't have to be as specific. I use a dasher with younger kids, and they love it. They don't know what it means. I sometimes don't know what it means when they run sometimes. Like, who are you, right? They run some crazy time, and then the next rep, they like get super excited about it, which is great. And the next one is like 2 seconds slower. It's like, all right, well, this means absolutely nothing. But the fact that they're, they're doing it, right? It's just the act of doing. And again, going back to Elizabeth's episode about just, playing, sprint work, speed work can be play for sure. Kids race at recess. I remember racing at recess all the time. That's play to me, right? It's just in a more formal setting. So I think, simplicity and trying to incorporate some type of little bit of instruction here or there. Don't look at your friend while you're running. Maybe look where you're going. stuff like that to make sure we're going in the right direction. So I don't think the physiological adaptation for speed development isn't it's probably not even on the checklist of things I'm looking at for younger athletes. But as soon as they get into, I would say probably if I had to I haven't really put a actual quantification on it, but I would say probably 10th grade. That's when we probably will really start trying to actually push those numbers in a more productive a more productive and structured manner.
As a non-North American, can I ask what 10th grade is?
Oh yeah. So 10th grade was second grade of high school. So I want to say 14, 15 years old.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to say 4. I could be completely wrong. I've been out of high school for a few years. I'm pretty sure it's 14, 15.
It's when I hear this, it's like the UK, they also have different, I think they say like fifth form or something. And in New Zealand, we say year 11. And I'm just like, I have no idea what these terms are. So it's helpful. I have kind of a selfish question, I guess, because I work entirely with sports that are not on solid ground. So two of the sports I work with are on ice, and one of the sports I work with is on sand. And I just wondered, for you, when you're working with athletes that might be competing on different surfaces, would there be different things that you would take into consideration for speed training? Or if you're really wanting to train speed, would you still train that on a standard surface?
Yeah, so to be completely honest, I have not had that come across my desk yet. It's not a thing I've had experience with or had really looked into, to be completely honest with you. And also, I just went to my first ice hockey game like 3 weeks ago with my wife.
Cool.
Yeah, it was cool. I enjoyed the fight and everything.
Yeah, they're brutal.
Yeah, they should let everybody do that. It would probably cut down on penalties. So I haven't had any opportunity to work with non-solid grounded athletes. But if I did, thinking about it right now, I probably wouldn't change anything other than the volume. When I train athletes at my facility, I train them essentially as a team, but they all come in as groups, just to keep kind of that team atmosphere, I guess, where there's multiple people at the same time. Because obviously, especially the more mature and experienced they get and closer to, higher level sport that they get into, they don't necessarily need to sprint great. But I think the ability or the capacity to sprint well is useful, just as far as, the physiological, whatever science word.
Yeah, and I think even when we think about, there's been a lot of talk about sprinting being like a vaccine for hamstring injury. I think there's also benefits with that as well.
Absolutely. Just those highly recruited motor units and this muscle fibers firing at essentially the fastest rate possible. I think just having that capacity is super beneficial for every athlete. Do they need to be great at it? Probably not, but it's helpful, right? Just kind of pushing that aspect of athleticism. It probably doesn't, translate that well to swimming, right? But having that ability to push the body a little bit harder, I think, is beneficial. I'd love to work with non-ground based athletes, but a lot of people don't like me.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
It's fine. It's the life I chose.
I've kind of gone with entirely weird sports in the last, well, not weird, but non-traditional in the last 5 years. So cool. It is, but it's interesting when I'm not sure what your kind of S&C background is, but I feel like a lot of the S&C certification and education is so focused on like basketball, football, soccer, so absolutely. You've really got to get in and be like, I mean, you have to do the needs analysis, and you're also I think this for me was a big thing of being like, I can actually really learn a lot from the athletes, like, you know, them telling me how things feel as well.
Yeah,
So
yeah, that was actually a big part of my development over the last 4 years, probably. Because obviously, when I used to coach football, I coached football and track at the previous school I worked at. And then a lot of the athletes that were coming in to my facility played either football or track. So that was kind of the base of my, which is fine, especially with track. Track. I think track and field has helped a lot with my understanding of athleticism and performance. Um, but then I got a few athletes that came in. A number of them played volleyball, and I had one that played field hockey. And I was honest with all of them. I was like, I've never in my life been to a field hockey game. One, because they're played in the same season, so I never really had a same season as football. So I never really had the opportunity to go to a field hockey game. But also, I didn't care, in all honesty. Like I know you guys are over there doing your thing. That's great. I just because I didn't have the experience with it, so I had no interest, right? And the same with volleyball. Volleyball is also played in the fall. We usually had either a practice or a game, so I can't do both. But I was a little more familiar with volleyball because that was like a game we played in elementary school, middle school, and gym class. So I was a little more familiar with the game, but having the communication with those athletes about, what position do you play? What does your position do? What do you need to do specifically? How can I help to improve whatever qualities of athleticism you need to be better at your sport? Then I got the opportunity to see several of them actually play their sport at both at actually Division 1 level. One is club, but it's technically Division 1. So being able to have the conversation with them in the training environment about what it is their sport entails and what it is they need, then being able to actually go see them do it, those two things in tandem really elevated my ability to program for not only them, but also the other athletes I train, even the adults that I work with. A lot of the protocols that I use for the athletes does translate over to the adults I work with, regardless of age. Just because those things are obviously the intensity is not the same, but the idea of human movement, it doesn't change just because you're not playing a sport. In my mind, like you don't finish your last game in college or high school, whatever it may be, and then you turn into some other life form. You're still the same person. You know what I mean? So still, going through certain movement patterns or doing certain lifts even. I've even had adults go through some variation of the A series with A runs or A skips or whatever it may be, just because those things, pretty much everybody's like, I haven't skipped in 30 years. And just having the ability to coordinate, use your natural rhythm and all those type of things throughout your entire sporting life and into adulthood, I think make a great bit of difference. And they seem to be working so far. Nobody's filed a lawsuit against me yet.
Ideal. So I want to come back to the strength training component as well.
Yes.
Yeah, because I think a lot of, especially when I'm working with younger athletes, a lot of parents, they don't see the value of strength training. And of course, there's a whole lot of reasons why they should be. But I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the role that strength training plays in speed.
Yeah, sure. And that's interesting because I actually have the opposite effect.
And is that because it's football, maybe?
Maybe. I think a lot of it has to do with how my facility looks because it's not a huge space by any means, but the main thing you see is the lifting area. Nobody really, because I have a small strip of turf that I actually got from another gym that closed. Lucky me. But like the strip it's a strip of turf, right? It's just there. It doesn't say sprint on me or anything, but everybody knows what weights are, right? So that's the main thing they see. And then obviously how I look, I'm not small. But I think for strength training, I'm sure you saw it on Twitter last week or this weekend or whatever it was, the
The
whole
rate of force development.
oh my goodness, what a time.
Yeah, there
That
was a
was
question on Twitter just for people listening. What was it? It was, can we
uh
even train rate of force development? Was that what it was?
so the original question was or it wasn't a question, it was a statement, which makes it worse, about is if you can produce X amount of force more than your opponent, the rate of force doesn't matter. Okay. Almost, I guess. But not so strength is definitely from just a sheer physics 101 standpoint, force strength is obviously a component of velocity being speed. But I think that we get, not we, a portion of strength and conditioning, strength being the operative word of the title, we kind of get caught up in the force, the peak force production, or the uh, even the rate of force. Sometimes we can kind of get caught up in. It's all context is like the biggest key to all of this. So with and I know a lot of times I see it all the time on Twitter or whatever social media outlet, or blog site or whatever, about how you can never be too strong, right? And I think that's not true. Simply put, I think you absolutely, and again, going back to concept, if I'm working with a track athlete, if I'm working with a wide receiver that plays football, if I'm playing with, I don't know, soccer player, if I'm playing with an athlete who their sport and their position in that sport, speed is of the utmost importance. I think they absolutely can be too strong. I think that strength is fantastic to have and to develop, but in the context of what it is that you're doing, it's probably for at least for field and court sports, it's probably not that important. I think if you get strong enough to the point where we have all these metrics about if you can squat 2 times your body weight or bench 1.5 times your body weight, all that type of stuff. That's great, but what can you do with that, and how fast can you do it, right? And how long can you do that fast? If you can squat 405 pounds, I guess that's 4 plates on each side, just to keep it simple. 405 pounds, my metric conversion is not.
I should know. Hang on. It's 183 kilo.
Oh, I was close. But yeah, so if you can, squat X amount of weight, but if we take a percentage of that, which most times in sport, squat moving that amount or producing that amount of force at whatever velocity isn't, it's not going to happen in sport, right? So if you're, for example, if you play basketball, you're a forward or whatever it may be, and you are going up for a rebound, you're producing more force than you would be for the weight you would do in the weight room, and you're doing it faster, right? So the strength training aspect of performance is important, but I think it's more important for resilience of joints, ligaments, tendons, the fascial system. Those things are more deeply affected with strength training than speed is for the context of this conversation. But it's still an important aspect of it, obviously, because you have to produce force, right, to change your position in space. So I think what parents, coaches, athletes, have to understand about strength training is that it's necessary. And I kind of get both sides of the spectrum depending on who I'm working with and what sport they play. Where there are some that come to me because they want to get stronger, they want to get more powerful. Great, I can handle that. Fantastic. Those are the ones really like, we're about to do a lot of sprints. You're going to lift, but you're also going to do a lot of sprints. On the other end of the or other side of that coin, I get athletes that come in like, I want to get faster. Fantastic. We're going to lift a lot, because chances are the ones that want to get faster are, I almost want to say, anatomically built for speed, right? They're usually smaller. They're not as heavy as other kids. So they know they have the physical appearance to be fast. They just don't have it, right? Those are the ones we're going to do a lot of technique work. Everybody sprints. Every athlete that I work with sprints. I don't really care what sport they play, we're going to sprint. Kind of going back to the previous question about, other non-ground-based sports, right? So those kids, they're going to do some technique work, because that's usually, especially younger kids, younger being like early high school age, they're not fast because their technique sucks. Not 9 times out of 10. Once we fix the technique, we can see a drastic improvement in their sprint times. From then, that's when we get them lifting. They're the ones that need to be able to produce more force. The bigger ones that want to lift, people that want to lift weights are usually already strong. Lifting weights isn't fun. I don't really care what anybody says. That's my hill I'm dying. Lifting weights is not fun. As I trained for a weightlifting competition this weekend. Anyways, the ones that want to lift weights, they're the ones athletically, sport athlete wise, they're the ones that need to sprint more. So again, everybody's sprinting, right? The ones that lift, obviously, if they're like, huge, if they're like an offensive lineman, and sprinting is probably going to hinder them to some degree in their joints, obviously we'll limit them. But if they want to lift, you'll sprint more. If they want to sprint, you're going to lift more. So I think there's a balance I'm having to play with to see who needs what, right? I wrote an article sometime, and basically saying that it was about track and field not being, essentially, track and field not being the answer to improving football players, American football, I should say. And it is beneficial, track and field, love track and field. I coached it, ran in high school. But you're training in track and field, especially in high school, you're training for the sport. You're not training for the adaptation, right? Obviously, we know the fast kids run track. Got that. Running with faster, if not equally fast, people helps you get faster to some degree, right? But you're not training the actual quality that you're needing for what you think you're training for, if that makes sense. So if we're, and I used to do the same thing myself, football season would be over, like, hey, and it's the multi-sport concept, like, hey, play as many sports as you can to, develop all these different skills. But in my experience, that doesn't necessarily work out unless they're already just athletic. So I think, I would tell them, after football season is over, take a little week break or whatever it is. If you need it, go play basketball, go wrestle, do whatever other sports are in the winter. Then when the spring comes around, run track, play baseball, not necessarily play soccer, because that's a little bit different than most sports just because you don't use your hands. And that was kind of the cycle, right? But I think it was getting to the point where I was actually seeing that guys that play football going to track in the spring, they're actually coming back slower, right? And so I think part of that was because, one, the track team wasn't lifting on a regular basis. They were lifting, but it was very sporadic. And then kind of going back to our original points was that the volume was just too high. So they were coming into the summer training. They were well conditioned. They could do all the workout with essential ease. But they lost the speed that they had from, a football season prior. So I think when we look at the total necessity of our different physical qualities being strength, velocity, or strength, speed, and power, there's depending on who the athlete is, there's a pie chart, right, where you have those three things. And depending on who it is, that's where the pie chart changes, right? Do they need more strength to be faster? Because and starting out, a lot of, especially, 11 to 13-year-old age group, they're just not strong. That's why they're not fast, right? They're just not strong enough to push themselves in whatever direction. So they need to get stronger. As they get stronger, the pie chart starts to change where, all right, we're starting to get stronger. Now we're not having the continuation of acceleration. So maybe we need to focus a little bit more on power, where the strength that they've built in the earlier ages, now they're, a higher percentage of that force they can produce at a faster rate of force. And then once the power improves, right, then we get focused more on higher velocity speed training. And that's usually, I've had a couple 16, 17-year-olds where that's like their thing, but they were track athletes through and through. They didn't play any other sport. It was just track. They can handle that type of work because max velocity sprinting takes a lot out of you. If you're really doing it the way you're supposed to be doing, it takes a lot out of you. But they can handle a lot of athletes that either haven't ever really been involved with, and usually track. They've never been on the track team. They've never really sprinted. They've done like little wind sprints, but they've never really stood up and ran really fast. And so most of them never really get into that type of work because they also don't need to, right? If I have a football player, we might go 40 yards, but beyond that, it's not necessary. Just again, because based off of what they do, based off of the things they're used to in their sport, that just pushes us closer to injury, right? And that's my job, right? As a coach, that's our job as coaches to figure out what that pie chart looks like for each individual athlete as far as strength, speed, and power, and just manipulating that over time. And that's pretty much all we can do. Just being aware of that pie chart and tracking the information that we're getting back from the athletes.
Do you feel like you've got any key take-home points that you would give to athletes or coaches regarding speed training?
Don't do too much. That's kind of the main thing I kind of wanted to express, and that's my main issue that I guess fighting against now is just doing too much, either in general or too soon. I think we have the tendency, and I say we as coaches collectively, we have the tendency to want to, we want to get the athletes we work with, we want to get them as good as we can, as fast as we can, right? And so we're not necessarily shortcutting the process, but we're trying to expedite it. And I think that's when we really start getting in trouble because we miss a lot of development in not just athletic performance, but human performance in general. And so, just taking the developmental process step by step. I know we see, these freak athletes coming out of high schools every year, and they can do these phenomenal things once they get into college, or even if they're able to go to the professional level straight out of high school, they're able to do these freakish things, but that's, those type of people don't come around ever, essentially. They're anomalies. And this is not to say that, younger athletes that don't have those natural elite gifts early on, that's not to say they can't get there. It's just saying, take your time with them. You know what I mean? They're, obviously there's a time frame, right, that we have to work within as far as getting them to a point they need to be at to succeed in the place they're at and then going to the next level. But if we're trying to rush the process, then we're, again, missing out on the developmental stages. And just like child rearing, right? If there are certain progressions or certain milestones you have to hit when raising a child, it's just a matter of getting the global athletic development incorporated into it. I was at the National High School Strength Coaches Association's national convention last year, and we heard Coach Ryan. He works for one of the soccer leagues. I want to say Manchester's Developmental League. Des Ryan, that's his name, Des Ryan. And he was talking about how essentially they specialize these kids from like 9 years old or whatever, and how they track their development over time. And he showed videos and pictures of, just the things they do in the training setting where they are able to get those other skills, right? Obviously they're there for soccer, but they're able to incorporate other movement skills, other areas of just movement and athleticism. They're able to incorporate that into their training to make sure they're developing the full spectrum athlete and human, and not just focusing on that one thing. So I think that's where, especially here in the States, that's where we get into trouble, is we have kids that specialize, and it's usually one of like three sports. It's either baseball / softball, volleyball, or basketball. Those, or soccer. So 4, 5 if you separate baseball and softball. But those are the ones that really, they hone in on just those skills and really close off a lot of the other aspects of movement and movement proficiency. And then that's where you see the overuse injuries, the mental burnout, all that type of stuff. And that's why it's a problem. But to answer the question you actually asked me, yeah, just keep it simple. Don't try to do too much too soon. Don't try to do too much too late. Because that's, the other end of the spectrum is, I've had a lot of, especially after everything opened back up after COVID happened, I was getting a lot of female athletes that were like juniors and seniors in high school. So they were about to graduate to go to college. And it's kind of like they were a little bit behind the ball, right? And not necessarily physically, but as far as just formal athletic development, I'll say. Skill wise, in their individual sports, they were fine, right? That's why they were able to have the opportunity to play at the next level. But as far as just the training process, they were, as novices as they come. But with the athleticism that they already had, they were kind of able to climb the ranks a little bit faster than most would. But just still being able to do things with them that they weren't able to do otherwise, or weren't given the opportunity to do otherwise, I think, is something we have to work on as a profession, is just making sure we're feeding the knowledge to the right people that are in control of them. Because, for me being in the private sector exclusively right now, it's only so much I can give to an athlete that comes in here, because at the end of the day, they have to go back to their team and their coach, and that's who gets the final word. It doesn't really matter. I can give them the best advice possible, and I do. At least I try to. But they're gonna run they're gonna run a mile before track practice, and then sprint during the workout. That's gonna happen, and I can have a conversation with whoever, the appropriate authorities. But at the end of the day, I can only do but so much, but I'll do it within the context of what you need. And, we're not going to double dip into anything. That's why we're not going to double dip in anything you're already doing. So the track athletes I've had in the past, when they come in their in season, which is completely fine, I actually encourage them to come in season just to make sure they're staying healthy, essentially. We don't hardly do any sprint work. Those are probably the only athletes that I have at any given time that don't sprint, unless they have like an off week or a spring break or something like that. But if they had practice at any point in that week, they just come in, stretch, roll out, and lift and go home. But other than that, that's all the advice I could give, is just, keep it simple.
Thank you, Kendall.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much, Siobhan, for having me. This is awesome.
I'm wondering if you can tell us where people can find you if they're interested in learning a little bit more about you and your work.
Yeah, if you want to learn more about me for whatever reason, you can find me on Instagram. My business page is Green Roots, GreenRootsPW. You can find me on Twitter at Coach Green, Coach with a K, because my first name's Kendall. Had the same conversation with Julia. She thought it was cool. Maybe. Coach Green with a K on Twitter. You can also find my personal page on Instagram, but that's just me pretending to be a weightlifter. Not as impressive.
Your weightlifting is impressive. I don't think you're just pretending.
I do my best. It hurts a lot, but it's a good time. I'm enjoying the process. And then also I have a number of articles on Simply Faster just to get a deeper, more formal look into my thought process as far as athletic strength and conditioning goes.
Yeah, I'll share some links to some of those as well. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much. Absolutely. Thank you. This was great.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Just a reminder that you can find further podcast episodes at www.siobhan-milner.com/podcast. And this is where you can also find different ways of working with me if you head to www.siobhan-milner.com. Enjoy.